Hello guys, welcome to the next video on Java programming tutorial for beginners. In this video we will see what is an exception in Java and how we can handle exceptions in Java using try-catch block. So first of all, what is an exception? By the official definition, an exception is an event which occurs during the execution of the program which can disrupt the normal flow of the program's instruction. Okay, so let me give you an example. For example, I declare an integer variable and I initialize it by some value, for example 100. Okay, and then I divide it by 0. And we all know that whenever some integer is divided by 0, it gives us infinity. And Java program is not able to handle this situation, right? So let's try to print something. For example, sys out, and I'm going to print this line after the declaration of this variable like this. So when I run the program, if I see this, that means this declaration is valid for me, right? Because this initialization is successful and I will be able to see this line. If I will not be able to see this line, that means the initialization fails. So I'm going to save this program and I'm going to run my program, and you see in the console the exception in thread main occurs and Java gives us the location of the exception or error, and this is at line 6, which is this one, right? And which exception occurs here? Arithmetic exception occurs. So this infinity is not handled by the Java. Okay, now in these situation where Java is not able to handle this exceptional situation, what we can do is we can catch this exception by using a try-catch block. So normally how we can write a try-catch block, just write try and then this curly braces and end the curly brace, and after that you need a catch. So catch, and in the brackets you give the situation which you want to handle, and in here in the catch you can print the situation, or you can do whatever you want to do after handling the exceptional situation. Okay, so now I'm going to place my code inside this try catch block. Okay, and here is the exception we want to handle. So this code is throwing this exception called arithmetic exception. Okay, so we want to handle this here, so just write arithmetic exception and then give the variable name. Okay, and in here you can even print this value of the exception which is thrown, which is this exception exactly. But let's run the program and then see what happens. So now when I run the program, I can see this line printed. That means the exception is thrown, but it's caught by this try catch block, and then we come to the next line of code and we are able to print this line. Now in order to handle the situation after the exception, so for example we want to know which exception is thrown by this try catch block. Inside this we can handle this situation of exception. For example, I want to print this exceptional situation, so this arithmetic exception will handle this infinity situation, and we can print it using this e object of arithmetic operation. So to print this exception we can just write system out println and e. Okay, and let's save this program and run it once again, and now we can see this exception is printed. This is due to this line. Okay, and then our normal program execution is happening, which is printing this line. Okay, now in this try catch block you can add multiple catch blocks, so you can handle multiple exceptional situations. Okay, so for example, I can do something like this. I'm catching this exception, arithmetic as exception, and I want to handle one more exception, which is the general kind of exception. I don't know what kind of exception this is, so I will use this general exception. Okay, and then I'm going to print this. Okay, and now also it's going to execute the same program in the same way, but in the case of exception other than this exception, which is this one, this code is going to execute. Okay, so now let's add some more exceptional situation. So for example, I will declare a variable which is an array outside my try catch block, and inside my try catch block I want to print the third element of the array. We know that the initialization of array is with index 2, so third element is out of scope of this array, right? So let's print this, and I'm going to declare it as variable b because a is already here. Okay, and I'm going to print here the value of b3, so the value of b at index 3. Okay, and I'm just going to write and plus. Okay, this I want to execute. Now let's see what happens. I'm going to save this program and run this, and it's going to give me this arithmetic exception once again due to this line. So let me comment this line for now. Okay, and let me save this once again and run the program once again. And now you can see this exception, different exception is thrown, and which is caught by this bigger exception, or the exception which has more priority, for example. Okay, so this exception, which is array index out of bound exception, is handled by this general exception here, which is this line. Okay, so if you don't believe me, let's comment this code and this code here. Okay, so and let's run the program once again, and you see the same exception. So it is caught by this exception. Okay, you can even do just copy this exceptional condition here and paste it here. Okay, and then it's going to give the same result, which is array index out of bound exception. Okay, so exception class is a general class. If you don't know which exception is thrown by your code, you can use this exception. Otherwise, if you know that your code can throw arithmetic exception or array index out of bound exception, then you can handle the specific exception. And always remember that you can add multiple catch blocks with your try block. Okay, so 1 catch block, 2 catch block, you can even handle 3 catch block. And in this situation, for example, I want to handle this array index out of bound, and when you do something like this, it's going to give you this error bubble here, and it says unreachable catch. Or let me save the program and run it, and let's say what it says. It's unreachable catch block. Why? Because this general exception class has more priority than this array index out of bound exception. So this should come at the last. Okay, so when I do something like this, I'm going to cut this and I'm going to paste it below this array out of bound exception here, then my error will be gone. So always remember, this exception class should go at the last. Okay, and other exception like arithmetic or index out of bound will be above it because they have the lesser priority. Okay, and it's this exception is more general exception you want to handle. Okay, so in this way exception works in Java, and you can handle exceptions using try catch block. In this video we will see what is finally block in Java and how we can use it with try catch block in Java. So first of all, what is a finally block? The finally block always executes when the try block exists. Okay, so generally you use finally block when you want to add a try catch block with your code. Okay, and the property of finally block is it always execute whether your exception occurs or it doesn't occur. It doesn't matter what the code does, it throws exception or it doesn't throw exception, this finally block is always executed. So using this finally block you have always the chance to release your resources. Okay, so let me give you an example. In the last video we have seen that we can use a try catch block something like this, and this is the code which throws an exception because any integer which is divided by 0 will give an infinity, and then Java will throw an exception for that. And which exception it throws? It throws arithmetic exception, right? Now to add a finally block to our try catch block, what we can do is we can just write finally and then in the curly braces you can close it. Okay, so this is how you add finally block to your try catch block, and the property of this is it's always executed. So for example, I can print something here, for example finally called. Okay, and let's add this print message here, and here we can say catch called. Okay, and let's save the program and run the program, and in here you see here it gives you this finally called message, right? And when I just scroll little bit above, it prints catch. That means this code throws an exception, and then this line is printed, and then it prints the exception which have occurred, and then at the end when the exception is thrown and caught by this catch block, at the end this finally will execute. Okay, and this makes sure that you can release all your resources, or this can be used to do the final work whatever you want to do after the exception, or even if the exception doesn't happen, then also you can use finally in most of the situations. Okay, so it's a good practice to use finally with your try catch block. Okay, and there is only one situation where this finally block will not be called, and this situation is when you call a system.exit method inside your try block. So for example, I do something like this, system.exit with some integer here, for example 1, and I will comment this code, and when I run the code, then what happens? See, nothing happens. Why? Because we have called system.exit and it exits from the program, and this is the only situation where this finally will not be called. In any other situation, if the exception is thrown, if the exception is not thrown, finally will be called. Okay, now to understand this situation in a better way, let's create a method, for example public static void, or let's return integer here, and let's say return int. Okay, let's say this method only return integer. Okay, So, and inside this I'm just going to copy and cut this code which I have in the main and paste it here. Okay, and in the last what I want to do is I want to return some integer. So for example, I want to return the value of a, right? So I want to declare this a outside my try block. Okay, and for example, we don't divide this 100 by 0, so it's valid situation, and we want to return a, right? So in here I want to delete this and I will return a. Okay, and for example, it throws an exception and it goes here. I want to return a here also, and in here also I want to return a. Okay, so in finally block I want to return a. This situation we will see later, but for now I want to do something like this. And in here I just want to call my system out, so sys out, and in here I just want to call my return int method, okay, inside this. Okay, so let's run the program and let's see what happens. So I'm running the program and it returns 100 and 100 is printed here, and then finally block is called after the try block returns. So even if your function returns, this finally block will be called. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you return from try block. Generally you would think that you are returning from here, then after return no code will be executed, but for finally it's an exception. Finally will be executed even if you are returning in the try block or even in the catch block also. So let's divide it by 100, or divide this by 0, not here, but for example do it here. A is equal to a divided by 0. Okay, so it will throw, right? So it will go here and then exception code will be called, and then let's see what happens. So save the program and run the program, and once again we can see catch is called, so it throws an exception, it goes here, and it first of all it calls this finally block which prints this message finally called, and then only we will be able to see this 100 which is returned by this return. So it doesn't matter if you return from the try block or catch block, finally will be called in that situation also. Now there is one more situation which can occur. For example, I want to return from the finally block also. So for example, right now I have assigned a is equal to 100, right? And in the finally block I can override my return value. For example, I can do something like this: a is equal to 1000 or 5000. Okay, and then I can return a. Now what will be returned from here? Will it return 100 or will it return 5000? Let's see what will happen. So let me do this after this here, and what I'm going to do here, I will save this program and I'm going to run it, and you can see that finally overrides your return value also. Okay, so ideally it should return 100 if you don't return from finally, right? So I don't want to return from finally. I will save it and it will return 100 like this. Okay, but when you return from finally and you want to change the value which you want to return in finally, then finally will override your earlier return value, for example 5000. So I will save this and run this and it will return 5000. Okay, so in this way you can use finally with your try catch block. And always remember, it's a good practice to use finally with your try catch block. So always try to use it whenever you use try catch blocks. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please rate, comment and subscribe, and bye for